Well, back at home, some more now from that New York Times interview with President Trump. The president says that he wants to work with Democrats on a deal to protect the so-called dreamers, those who came in as children illegally with their parents. But the president says that he still needs to fulfill a campaign promise. Here's what he said, an element of that interview. He said, "We can do a great infrastructure plan through bipartisanship. And we can do, on immigration and DACA in particular, we can do something that's terrific through bipartisanship. But I wouldn't do a DACA plan without a wall because we need it. We see the drugs pouring into the country. We need the wall." So let's bring in our panel. Amy Holmes is a political analyst with Rasmussen Reports, and Doug Schoen is a former advisor and pollster to President Bill Clinton. He's also a Fox News contributor. Thank you both for joining us today.
Sure, Heather.
Thank you. So the New York Times lucking out again, and this extensive interview. In it, the president, he talked very clearly about areas where he feels that there's room for bipartisanship and some agreement from both sides. Do you agree with him, Amy? I'll start with you in terms of DACA moving forward. Can both sides come together on that?
Boy, that is a tough one. And Heather, you know, Nancy Pelosi, the leader of Democrats in the House, she had promised constituents that Democrats were going to try to take this on with Dreamers by the end of the year and failed in that promise. And in fact, a lot of constituents groups don't believe that Democrats really want to find a solution, that they'd rather have an issue going into 2018 to campaign against Republicans. But I think it should be a bipartisan issue. Most Americans agree we need border security. We also need, most Americans agree that we need a compassionate approach to young people who came here through no fault of their own, not of their own volition, who've grown up in the United States and feel very much like a part of our country. There needs to be, you know, proper and compassionate way to address that.
Doug, when the Democrats who agreed to moving the spending bill forward to this agreement that I think they have to reach by January 19th, they were upset with Democrats who agreed to do that moving forward because they did want DACA to be a completely separate issue. So how will this impact Democrats moving forward?
Well, it complicates things, Heather. I think Democrats would do better to have a clean continuing resolution on the budget and on the debt and to do the kind of deal that the president described. Look, this is a giant step in the right direction. I think we should be completely positive, not point fingers retrospectively, but proactively say if we can get a deal on DACA and some sort of border security, we will be stepping forward. I would take it a step further and say, hopefully we could do comprehensive immigration reform. But even if we don't do that, if we get a deal there and we come up with a way to do the infrastructure through some sort of public-private partnership, we're way ahead of the game, and it'll be a win-win for both parties.
But will that hurt Democrats, though, in terms of trying to combine, you know, immigration reform, the funding for the border wall in exchange for allowing these dreamers and DACA to stay here?
I think when you have bipartisanship and both sides get something that they want, both sides win. And frankly, the Democrats, as we've said, have moved too far to the left. This gets them back to the center. If you ask me whether this is a positive for the Democrats, I think it's a huge positive, and I think it could be the first step, as I indicated, to a broader agreement. Yeah. The Democrats want to retake the House. The only way they can do it is to win districts that were very competitive or where Donald Trump won.
Amy, how will this impact Republicans, though, when you think about it in terms of future, the midterm elections coming up? I was reading this article, this was from Breitbart, and they said, quote, that a GOP congresswoman had said to them that this is a president's defining moment in terms of what happens with DACA and immigration reform moving forward.
Well, remember that immigration was one of the #1 issues that got President Trump into the White House. So he has an obligation to deliver on that campaign promise. It was very popular among voters in terms of tightening up, or rather trying to reverse illegal immigration. And it was succeeding, actually, in the beginning of his presidency. You saw illegal border crossings dropping precipitously. But in terms of putting this deal together, I think where you get the real sticking point is the president's insistence on ending chain migration. We haven't talked about that. And that's something that Democrats have been very strongly opposed to. They like chain chain migration, and some would say for some sort of cynical, self-serving electoral points. But in terms of how does this play out in 2018, I think Doug would agree with me. A lot of that has to do with turnout. And in 2018, it tends to be older voters, a little bit more conservative leaning. But again, also remember that in this first midterm with a new president, that president generally loses seats in his own party.
Yeah, in terms of chain migration, though, it is a problem that does have to be discussed. I mean, one of the numbers was that for every 2 new immigrants to the U.S., they bring in about 7 foreign relatives with them. So the numbers just continue to increase. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great New Year. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Well, speaking of the new year, preparations are underway for the New Year's Eve countdown to 2018. We are in the heart of Times Square for a look at what the NYPD is doing to protect the party goers who want to brave the cold.